But
Okay, where is my closed caption?
I'm not going to shout out people. They may not want to be shouted out.
It's hard. We don't. Yeah, I'm getting used to remembering not to do that unless people ask for it. So, yeah, welcome folks. Go ahead and just put in the chat. Again, we will not say your names. If you can, just go ahead and put in the chat where you're watching from, and we'll get started here shortly. Just wait a few more minutes, give people some time to come in. We have the closed captioning on now. I think it's working on the video, and they might have to refresh. Yeah. New Jersey, welcome. Right. Yay. Welcome, New Jersey. I'm so glad the chat works now. Yeah. Not working on Facebook. Oh, click your closed caption here. Oh.
Hi, friend. Hi, friend.
All right, Chicago. Yeah, your friends are here.
All right.
Awesome.
One of the most amazing facilitators on the planet right there. So now I have to be on my best behavior because my friends.
Awesome. And yeah, if you all end up having questions during the webinar, let us know if we can say your first name or not. It does help us. Otherwise, we will refrain from saying your first name, but it is helpful to know ahead of time so that, if we would say, for example, Sally. So Sally asked a question and that's all we would say. We wouldn't say last name or where you're from, but okay. So not here to judge, just to listen and learn. That was a message for you, Cassandra.
I know.
For us too. Maryland, Eventbrite. Well, welcome. Yay. Welcome. This is terrific. So we're very excited to have Cassandra here with us. So we'll get started, but please feel free to keep putting things in the chat, y'all. But we want to do an introduction to create a safe space here for Cassandra and for ourselves. So first of all, we want to start off by acknowledging that all land is Indigenous land. Where we are, and we just put that out there as a reminder of the Indigenous people. And we also want to state that all races, genders, cultures, abilities, sexual orientations are valued here, heard, accepted, and welcomed. We also ask that this be a safe and soft space. And what we mean by that, and I heard the term to land, a space where people can land softly. I heard it first. I don't know where it came from previously, but I heard it first from my friend Sonia Renee Taylor. You can follow her on Instagram. The Body is Not an Apology. It's her Instagram. And she's an author and very eloquent speaker. But the idea is that in this webinar, we talk about things that are difficult. We also talk about things that are joyous. We talk about anything actually that the panelist wants to speak about with their experiences with systemic racism in their upbringing or their current life. And then we also ask that the people who are here watching receive that person, receive us, all of us, receive each other, receive you all as participants, attendees, in a way that is non-judgmental, non-aggressive, and compassionate. And that we can't, and it's okay to disagree. It's okay to agree to disagree. And that no opinions, thoughts, or beliefs are to be said no. We don't say no to each other in the sense that somebody has a feeling, somebody has a thought, it can be real for them. And so we want to be able to allow people to have that space to be here and share openly. And then again, reminder that we can agree to disagree at times. Jody and I have learned a lot doing these webinars the last 2.5 years. We have met a lot of phenomenal people, and we've grown. We have grown a lot. So I'll turn it over to Jody to read the webinar purpose.
Thank you. Yeah. Misha actually created this webinar and fortunately asked me to join and facilitate it with her. And the webinar was created to engage in honest and authentic conversation about the long-time injustice of racism in America. During the webinar, we discussed systemic racism in an effort to dismantle white hatred, white crimes, and white violence from the inside out. And we're intentionally using those words instead of white supremacy, because on this webinar, actually someone brought up that when we use the word white supremacy, we are handing that term supremacy to whites and white people and white community, when in fact it's white crimes that have been committed against other races and cultures and people, and it's been white hatred and crime and violence. So we're intentionally using those terms now. Our intention with these webinars is to participate in sustainable action, and to highlight the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color community members, giving them a safe space to be heard about their own experiences, their own challenges, their own hopes, without the need to educate white people.
Yeah. So with that, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Again, my name is Jody Lewis. I am an attorney. I work for a nonprofit agency that provides services for survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence crimes. Keep it short tonight.
Keep it short tonight. Yep. And then I'm Misha Safran, and I was an educator for 30 years. I'm now a transformational life coach. I'm also a facilitator for diversity, equity, inclusion, and access and belonging trainings. And I have my own company now, and delighted to be able to bring inclusion and belonging programs into the world so that we can have better diversity, equity, and inclusion access opportunities. This webinar is really important to me. It's really been something that I've learned a lot, but I've also, I feel like we've started creating some really beautiful friendships with people around the world, and looking forward to hearing from our guests. So with that, we want to make sure we give our guests all the time we can. Cassandra Porter is an author. Cassandra Porter, I'm going to read a little bit more than we talked about, because I just, the bio is really beautiful. And Cassandra, you have really, when I read your bio, it just filled my heart. And of course, what people don't know is we met a month ago via Zoom, and your heart really was big and beautiful, and just felt good. And you had that lovely shirt on with the melanin, the scale of the melanin, and it was ideal. It was like, oh my goodness, look at this. This is a beautiful connection. And I
actually wore today with my daughters, so that's my friend who's on here, he probably saw that picture. We all wore it to church this morning. So yeah.
I love it. Yeah, it's really important. You know, I think that people don't, there's just language that we're trying to bring into the world now that hasn't been. And so delighted. And so, okay. So Cassandra is, she's done a lot of things and she's going to tell you the story about her company, Favorite Part of My Day. But she also does some very incredible trainings, powerful, impactful, diversity training, consultation, cultural competency, and racial equity trainings. Cassandra is also the author, and also it's award-winning of the book, I Am That One Black Friend, Lessons from a Magical Unicorn, which is a conversation about race and racism as the reader walks through Cassandra's life story. So she's an equity practitioner who serves her community because service is one of her core family values. She teaches young people in Sunday school and children's church at Eastern Star Church. She's in leadership in both the Tennessee State University Alumni Association, Greater Indianapolis chapter, as well as Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority and Chi Chi Omega chapter. And so without further ado, we are sending this energy, the microphone, here you go. Cassandra, and hello, welcome.
Thank you so much. So excited, honored to be in this space. And yeah, so another of my sorority sisters sent me the information about this webinar and said, hey, why don't you check this out? And we met, and I was like, these are the coolest people. Like, how do I get to meet such cool people? So super honored to hang out, and happy to answer whatever questions come up. I wanted to share just a couple of things. Yes, I do own my own company. So for a number of years, I worked in the child welfare service here in Indianapolis, Indiana. So I live in Indiana, so I so appreciate the land acknowledgement because of all the places, and I know it is all the places, but Central Indiana is absolutely a place that should be recognized more than it is, unfortunately, as far as Indigenous land. So I appreciate that. But yeah, I worked in child welfare for a very long time in very traditional senses of child welfare, like knocking on the doors, assessing abuse and neglect. And then there was a season that I had my oldest daughter, who was the same age as a child that called 911 in a domestic violence situation. So the child was 4, my oldest daughter was 4, and I struggled with the ability to work that case. I'm totally convinced all children have that same kind of tenor to their voices. They all kind of sound the same. And so it was just very difficult for me to work that case because the child sounded like my child. And so I came out of the field, is what it was called at that time. And I started training. And so I was in central office and training, really loved training. I come from a family of educators. My mom retired from teaching. My mom is 76. She retired a couple of years ago after 47 years of teaching first graders.
Wow.
But my mom was the probably typical Black mom of her age. And she basically said, you either got to be a doctor or a lawyer, because I don't want you to be poor. You can't be a teacher. I don't want you to, struggle. My mom is, again, she's 76. So if you know the history of our country, she was in the very tail end of the Jim Crow South. So she's from Mississippi. So all of that dynamic, I'm sure, was playing into the you have to be a doctor or a lawyer type thing. You can't be a teacher. And lo and behold, what am I really great at? Teaching, right? So when it was time for me to leave child welfare, my husband and I had a conversation about, if you could do anything, if you could be anything, what would you do? And I said, I would teach. I would just talk about equity and racism and oppression all day long. And he says, well, we live in Indiana. Do you really want to have conversations like that? And oh, how true he was. And I said, yeah, I do. I think it's important. I think we need to do this. So we talked to the girls at the time about, mommy's going to, change jobs. And if mommy worked for herself, what would it be called? Right. So because I worked in child welfare and I learned how to interview children, one of the things we asked our daughters at the end of every day was not, what did you do at school? Because every child is going to say nothing.
Yes.
We didn't ask, what did you do today? Because they're all going to say nothing. We didn't ask, did you have fun? Because, so we asked our girls, what was the favorite part of your day? Because if a small human can remember something at dinner time, it was pretty impactful and it was special. And so my oldest daughter says, you should call it favorite part of my day, mommy, because everyone loves favorite part of my day and you want everyone to love your company. And I was like, mommy's going to be talking about some really difficult things. I don't know that everyone will love favorite part of my day. And I realized from a marketing standpoint, it tells nothing about the company, right? I don't say what we do, but it's special to me. It makes me smile every time I tell the name of it. So that's how we started favorite part of my day in 2012. So
side note, you can look up Favorite Part of My Day, LLC, if you want some equity diversity training with Cassandra. So we're plugging you in. We want to make sure everybody please pass the word on, because one of the things that we like to do for our panelists is to promote their business, promote their book, promote whatever it is that's special to them. So I think it's a great name. I've remembered it ever since I met you. Favorite Part of My Day, LLC. So back to you.
Yes. So absolutely. Yeah. So that is the lead up to how the company started, because as we were having our first discussion last month, I was really frustrated about something that had happened, which I'll share about that. But I think it's important, yes, to plug in and then plug the company, because when I was growing up, there was not a lot of encouragement around supporting women-owned businesses, small businesses, Black businesses. Yes, they existed, but there wasn't that kind of coolness around, oh, support your small business or Small Business Saturday, or, you know, those types of things. So now that we are in a space where it's the cool thing to do, I think we absolutely should plug that. So yeah, so I started my consultation training in 2012, and like many small business owners, it was a huge learning curve, which I think happens with everyone. I feel like people go into business for themselves because they do at least one thing well. They don't do everything well, but they do at least one thing well, right? So I feel I'm a great trainer and I'm a great facilitator of very difficult topics. But that does not mean I know how to do accounting for tax time. I don't know how to always do great marketing, because really, how do you market? We help you with your systemic racism. Like, it just doesn't roll off the tongue really well, right? So there's just a few things that are challenging to just running a business in general. And I feel like there are things that are challenging to running a small business. I feel there are challenges around being a Black woman-owned business. I feel that anti-Blackness permeates our society so much that people don't even realize their reaction when whatever, right? So when it's, you know, yes, I want a proposal after we've talked for 30 minutes and whatever about you're having all kinds of debauchery and nonsense in your company and you really need help, right? You really need some assistance. And so I send you a proposal, but because in the back of your mind, it's a Black woman, so it should be free, right? Because we're so conditioned in our country that Black women save the day for free all the time, that the expectation that a Black woman should charge for her expertise and her service is just a lot of cognitive dissonance, I feel, happens. So there's that just added challenge. So I'll share something that I was not aware of before owning a business, but was the story that I shared last month. So one of the things that, again, I was not aware of, when there are state contracts or federal contracts or any type of large contract with a large organization, that prime is what it's called here in Indiana. It's probably that way everywhere. The prime bidder is required to have a certain percentage of their contract that goes to different entities, right? So it could be called set aside, it can be called quota, it can be called reparations, whatever you choose to call it. But that's how contracts are kind of set up. That's how the government or the state or the city has decided is the best way to handle equity. Okay. So in my world, I am a certified woman-owned business, and in Indiana, it's called a certified minority-owned business. I absolutely hate the word minority, and I don't use it in my trainings. My daughter uses the phrase people of the global majority. I should probably petition to get them to change the certification name, but until that happens, they call it MBE, MBE, minority-owned business, WBE, woman-owned business, right? So and there's VBE, veteran-owned business. So a certain percentage of the contract has to go to these entities. And again, I never knew this happened, right? I didn't know that there was such a thing. I didn't know the process in Indiana to become one of these certified businesses and how cumbersome that process is. Through this particular department, it's free. So with the Indiana Department of Administration, the state agency, it's a free process. It's cumbersome, but it is free. And I say that to say there are other certifications that are not free. So in order to get on these special lists, it costs money as a small business owner to be certified. Okay, so I'm on this list. I get my certification. I do all the things, jump through all the hoops, do the stuff, right? And primes reach out because they need a subcontractor, right? So they reach out, there's this list of a gazillion company names that also says what we do. So most of the subcontractor awards in the state of Indiana are not service-based industries, they're good-based industries. So I need someone to transport bricks, or I need a construction part, you know, it's a thing that they're needing. It's not necessarily a service like training and consultation. But every now and then I get these calls, and I didn't realize how common it was until another person wrote an article about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that happens to me. It is so frustrating. So you get this call from a stranger, or you get an email that says, hey, we need a partner, and we want you to partner with us, and the proposal's due tomorrow. So can you sign this letter of commitment? And let's be clear, the commitment is for a small percentage. By small, I mean the particular example I'm talking of is 9%. So 9% of the overall contract is what this prime is allocating towards my company.
And just to be clear, this is because they are required to work with these minority-based businesses as part of them receiving the funding that they need, correct?
Correct. Well, or they get preference. So in some contracts, it's a point system. So you get 10 points if you have a woman-owned business. You get 10 points if you have a minority. 10, 5 points if you have veteran-owned business. So when it comes to getting the contract, if you have a 70 versus you have a 100, the person with the 100 is going to get the contract because they said they were going to use these other businesses.
Because they said they were going to use these businesses. Not to give a spoiler alert, but go ahead, keep going. And my heart is still like, I'm still raging with you a little bit about this whole situation.
So, I mean, so to be fair, they're not required, but they are incentivized. I think that's the right way to say it, incentivized if they do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's no consequence if they say they're going to and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So that's important. So anyway, whoever will reach out, do you want to partner, yada, yada, yada. It doesn't happen every day, but it's pretty frequent that, I'll get some like stranger person will reach out. So 2 years ago, for this particular contract, this entity reached out and literally said the same thing that most people say. They said, oh, I saw the name of your company and I was so intrigued and it brought me such joy. I would love to partner. And I'm like, sure, absolutely. So the commitment on their part was 9% of a $500,000 project. That's what they were expecting. So I had to do the math beforehand because I don't do math in public. I wanted to make sure I got the numbers right. So I'm being fully transparent. So of a $500,000 contract, my business's portion would have been $45,000. Which means the rest of the contract to do all the other stuff they have to do is $455,000. So I share that because when I hear conversations around set-asides or quotas or, oh, they get all these money because they're Black-owned businesses. Okay, out of 500,000, 45 is great. I'm not saying, I committed to it. So I'm not saying it's not great, but it's not like it's the 500,000. So anyway, this project started 2 years ago. It will end January 31st, 2023. So it's a 2-year contract, started almost 2 years ago, will end next month. The commitment was our firm would do training and consultation around diversity, equity, the thing that we do, right? We said we would do that. They said they would pay us. And, life happens, right? I am very thankful that things are busy and and it really did slip my mind because other projects start taking on a life of their own, and okay, fine. And then something was like, oh, I need to check back with them. I need to circle back to see when are they going to schedule these trainings, because life is busy. So you can't just call me and say, hey, can you train my staff tomorrow? So I reached out this is December. So I probably reached out in July of this year, because again, the contract ends January. So I'm trying to, oh, absolutely. We totally thought it was going to be a bigger project. It's not as big. So they're not getting 500,000. They're getting 80,000, which is what she said. And I said, okay, there's still a 9% of 80,000 that you now have to, use. How are we going to do that? And so she's like, all right, let's schedule trainings for September, whatever. Okay, I circle back with the people that work with me, because I'm not the only one in the company. We prepare, we get ready for this training. Okay, so I haven't heard anything though. And I'm like, that's really odd that I haven't got a number of participants, or where we show up, or, you haven't asked for the PowerPoint or whatever. And let's say the training was scheduled for September 15th. So on September 14th, I say, hey, by the way, our training's scheduled for tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow. We're showing up an hour early, blah, 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 blah. The person says to me, oh, we didn't have anything on the calendar, and there's not a training. And I'm like, I send her the email because I keep the receipts. And I said, no, this is where oh, that totally slipped my mind. No, we're not having this training. No, this is not going to happen. And I'm like, okay, that's not professional, because again, I'm a small business owner, right? So I was planning for that. We had prepped for that, but okay. Then as I'm now circling back to okay, you got to get these things scheduled because the contract is going to end. And by the way, your staff has been doing this work for 2 years. You said you were going to need training. Y'all been doing whatever you've been doing for 2 years. You haven't had training. When are we going to get this on the calendar? We go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. She schedules one training, which is not the appropriate amount of her allocation that she should have used. And then says, you know what, by the way, we're not going to continue this contract with the state. We're not going to use you for the full allocation. And we're only going to have this one training. We're not going to have all that we should. We're not going to do this. I'm sorry, what? So you not only did not fulfill your commitment on the allocation, but more importantly, you don't even see the value of the work. So you don't see the value of having these conversations with your staff because you're not required to use your what? Yeah, so needless to say, go ahead.
Well, that's a really important pause, if you don't mind. I think the challenge here is that when people get caught up in what's required, as opposed to what, there's intention, right? But then we're talking about impact. So if you're looking at things only because they're required, then we're missing something. They're missing something really big.
Right.
So
right.
You just go along. What's the impact? Nothing changes. So honoring the contract, not just because it's required, but honoring the contract because there's an impact that you as a company want to make. And you're getting funds for it. And you've already contracted with a small business owner.
Right.
It's
not valuing you at all. Not to mention they already canceled on you.
Your staff's time, yeah.
Right. Because if the intention of the program, if you kind of look back to whomever thought it was a great idea for state contracts to have these particular, dynamics to them, it's because the state probably thinks they are encouraging small businesses. Right. That's probably the intention behind it. Or, whatever impact to the Indiana economy, right? That if I am giving work to staff, then, okay. So I say all that to say, number one, I never knew that as a non-business owner. I never knew that as a small business owner, a woman business owner, Black business owner. They're just all these dynamics to how this plays out that I wasn't aware. So I wanted to share that this evening, just because it's a small thing, but it's, from a business standpoint, it's a big deal to me, right? Because I have something of value to add to society, and this is how I choose to do it. And if you wanted to partner with me to make that impact, then it's frustrating. It's frustrating. At the end of the day, the work I do is challenging. The work I do makes people feel uncomfortable. One thing that I know as a Black woman in this country, it's very dangerous when white people are uncomfortable. And that's the nature of the work I do. So this dynamic of, contracting and all this other stuff it's just multi-layered and just challenging. So yeah, but I love self-employment. I love it for this season that I'm in. And it is definitely an interesting kind of feast or famine dynamic, which I think most small business owners probably can relate to. When things are rolling, they're rolling, but man.
Did this get resolved? Are you doing the training in January, or you're not doing the training in January?
I'll believe it when it happens, and I'll report back.
So there is a date. There is a date.
There is a date, but that doesn't provide me any comfort.
Right. No,
because
no.
they already canceled last minute on a
Right.
date that you already prepared for.
Right.
Right. And
are they
yeah.
giving you a retainer fee at this point?
No.
We talked about this last month, didn't we?
We did, because the contract I sent them, 2 months after, towards the end of the project, they refused to sign.
And is there anyone at the state that supports the process?
So there is, and there is a reporting process that I now know about. So there is a way for me to basically tattle, to say they said they were going to do this and they didn't, which I have used that now. But again, the nature of a small business, I don't advertise on billboards, right? I get the work I get because someone has seen me do the thing I do. So if there's a company out there saying, oh, they are difficult to work with, and all the Black women tropes, right? That they're, she's angry and difficult to work with, all of that factors into the business aspect of what I do.
It's really hard.
That's right. It makes it challenging.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad there's someone that can be of assistance to whatever assistance they can be. But I think it goes back to what you were originally talking about, though, which is that, Black women do things for free. And it's like, no, we're going to stop that. It's not going to be for free, and yet this particular, thank goodness that you haven't been doing your work for free. But right. This experience kind of highlights the lack of appreciation and value that this particular company has had for you and your business and the work that you do. Correct.
And they're in good company, right? So I know I glossed over that because, again, this is not a training, but if it were a training, we would sit in that for a minute, that the challenges that Black women have as business owners because of the historical biases and how that plays out today, right? Around all of the things we're doing for free, or not even all historical. It could still be the case. I don't know, depending on who you talk to. But I also wanted to your point around the action step, because I feel frustrated when I sit in a webinar and I get this information and no one tells me what to do. Not that it's a training, I'm not telling you what to do, but
you get to do whatever you want, Cassandra. If you want to train, you can train. We just make sure people who come onto this webinar know that the purpose is not for Black people to educate white people.
No.
Unless they want to, but we're not, that's not why we brought you here. We brought you here in your own space. So, yeah.
But I think it's fair to say, be more intentional in the circles that you are in, right? I don't know whomever's watching. I don't know what sphere of influence they may have, right? But if you happen to be in a circle where there's a way to support a woman of color, a man of color, a woman-owned business in an industry that is, historically underserved by women-owned businesses, right? I think that's a very intentional action that people can take, and you have to really consciously think about it, right? So like, I'm pretty intentional. Our family is approaching our Kwanzaa celebration. We celebrate Christmas and Kwanzaa. I'm very intentional that I am going to spend my dollars with Black-owned businesses through the Kwanzaa season, right? That means I have to intentionally search. So it's on my mind and I'll do it. So if you are aware, oh, there's probably a woman-owned accounting firm or something that I can patronize or refer. Like, for me, that's the takeaway. It's not really a teaching moment. It's just a takeaway to just be more aware and more intentional.
Well, and speaking to that, just before we forget, at the end of the webinar, everybody who's registered will get an email from us following up with a bunch of resources. And part of that resource list is Black-owned bookstores and other ways to patronize, and other resources for reading and documentaries and books. And one of the books we're highlighting tonight.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, there it is.
Yeah. There you go. I Am That One Black Friend. And what's the subheading again? I don't have it in front of me.
Lessons from a Magical Unicorn.
That's right, by Cassandra Porter. So you can buy her book, and we're going to put that link in the chat for y'all. There actually is you're doing a bundle, right? Where you're doing the workbook and the book for 30
Yes.
So there's
yes. So the book is 2 years old. My very good friend who's on the webinar actually edited. I didn't ask him to, but he's like this genius, and he basically caught all the comma mistakes. So the book is 2 years old. It came after the summer of 2020, and as a lot of things came after the summer of 2020. And then the workbook was released this September, because I started using the book with clients, and the workbook kind of solidified all the conversations we were having with clients. And so, yes.
And just so y'all know, we actually ordered it, and it's not here yet. So I don't want you guys to think that we've invited Cassandra here and we're not following our own words. So we did order it. Cassandra shipped it to us. We're just waiting for UPS to get their act together.
I know.
We were hoping to have it and read it through before tonight, and so we're disappointed. Well, we're excited to get it.
Yes, and that was my bad, because it's on Amazon, so you can get it on Kindle, but I didn't even make the connection because I was so determined you were going to have it, so I didn't even share.
No, but we wanted to support you and buy directly from you. I don't think we would have gone to Amazon anyways. Like, we would have waited. So, and just like somebody put in the chat, www.webuyblack.com is another website to purchase from Black-owned businesses. Thank you so much for that. And welcome back. I won't say your first name, but welcome back to the webinar. I'm glad you're here.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that experience with us and all who are here listening. It is very frustrating. We're LGBTQ, and obviously also identify as women, and I'm of mixed race. And the story that you just shared, it unfortunately is not a solo story. And it is discouraging, and it is frustrating. And, on one hand, somebody can be perceived, a white woman could be perceived as persistent and assertive and, doing what they need to get what's coming to them. Whereas a Black woman can be perceived as aggressive and feisty and angry. Right. And that's, I can't even imagine that you handled it any differently. I can see from your character and your nature that you were empathetic and compassionate and direct and assertive and persistent, right? These are all very important ways to change language. And as we've talked before, the three of us, language is important, and we're learning to change some language. The reason to change it from white supremacy to white crime, white violence, white hatred, right?
Right. So the other thing I want to share real quickly, as I was kind of processing through what to share this evening, One of the things that brings me such joy, and anyone who's read my book, anyone who's been around me for 5 minutes knows my passion for historically Black colleges and universities. I am the second generation of our family. So my mom, I shared, was a educator, and she and her twin were the youngest of 14 children. My grandparents were amazing people, and all of them were college educated in Mississippi, in segregated Mississippi, right? Most of them had their masters, most had doctorates, but of course it was segregated Mississippi. So they all went to historically Black colleges. So my mom is an HBCU grad. I am an alum of Tennessee State University, which is in Nashville, Tennessee. And my husband went to a historically Black college. My oldest daughter is in her freshman year at Tennessee State University. So I won. There was a whole battle going on in our family. And my school just came up with more money, so she picked. But I wanted to highlight HBCUs because, number one, I don't know that enough people know about their awesomeness and their greatness, and it brings me joy to talk about. There's a whole chapter in the book about my college experience where you literally can tell the difference between life, college, life, which I think happens for a lot of people that have great college experiences. But for me, I grew up in an all-white space, and I was the token Black student K-12. And so for me, that was the first time outside of like church environment, that was the first time that I was in the majority, that I walked onto the campus and everything reflected me. The music that was played at the football games, the food in the cafeteria, the art that was on the walls in the student union. It was such a place of joy for me. And I was so not used to it. I was like, wait, what? What? A lot of times in my trainings, I describe whiteness as being in water, and you're just a fish in the water, and you can't explain why a bird can't exist in that water, because a white person in whiteness is okay. Yeah. But I felt like a fish in water on that campus for the 3 years that I was there. So I graduated in 3 years. Wow. And so for that time, it was such a time of just being and feeling safe and feeling joy. And I was in the band in college, which was so different than my high school marching band, because my high school marching band was a very military style marching band. In your free time, if you ever Google white college band versus Black college band, you'll be entertained. And
very different music and approach, very different.
Very different. And
even churches, you look at the all white churches and the Black Baptist churches. I went to the Amani Church in Oakland, California, where I was a part of the Oakland Interfaith Gospel Choir. Mm-hmm. Very different energy, very different music, very different everything. So yes. A lot of rhythm and beauty and spice. And
it was all of that, but you're 18, right? Yeah. You're away from home. So which is what my daughter just experienced her first semester, which caused me a lot of anxiety. But anyway, not the point. But one of the things that is happening now is what some in the collegiate spaces are calling an HBCU renaissance, right? Because there is a population of students, right, my children included, but especially my freshmen in college, who literally watched our country through the summer of 2020. Like that was they were in the middle of the pandemic. They were in the middle of high school. They watched all of that happen, and they are watching it on social media, right? So they can talk to each other through all of this. So HBCUs are seeing such a boom in enrollment, which is amazing. and a little frustrating at the same time, because so many have been historically, intentionally under-resourced. So I will use TSU as an example because I know our story because it's my school. So for 60 years, the state of Tennessee has not allocated the state portion of the land grant funding to Tennessee State University. So Tennessee State is a land grant institution. In most of the states that have them, there are two because of segregation. So there is a white, predominantly white in Tennessee is the University of Tennessee, and the predominantly Black is Tennessee State. So there are two land grant institutions. The way those institutions work, you get a portion of your funding from the federal government and it's matched by the state, right? There's a state match. But much like we do our budget in our house, I'm sure how the state government does their budget, they look at the previous year and allocate for the next year, right? That's kind of how their budget works, right? So interestingly, there was a period when the state took out Tennessee State's allocation, the match money. It literally was not even a line item in the budget. It was just missing. So then, unless you were looking for it, you wouldn't know that it wasn't there, right? And if you have legislators that either don't know or don't care, they wouldn't catch it, right? But there was
They're just looking at the previous year, but it's gone.
Right.
But it's gone.
Wow.
There was a state senator who's also a grad of Tennessee State. His father was a state senator, and he did this study, found this money, and realized it was missing. His father, that's how I know it was 60 years. Harold Love Sr. was the first senator. Harold Love Jr. is the current senator from Memphis, Tennessee, to the tune of $500 million that the state of Tennessee owes Tennessee State University. Now, let's be clear. We're not alone. This has happened in a number, I don't know who's watching, but if anybody ever like Googles, a lot of people Google to check me when I'm speaking and training. So if you Google the other HBCUs that are historically underfunded, you'll see North Carolina A&T. I mean, it's ridiculous. But in the midst of all of the systemic wrong, HBCUs continue to just produce amazing, awesome world changers, right? People that are changing the world, doing amazing things. They're partying, which is what my freshman is experiencing. But she made the dean's list and it has like a 3.7. So I can't even be mad at her for partying. But I say that to say, in the midst of just systemic, even there was a hearing that actually went viral with a senator from Tennessee who was questioning the president of Tennessee State University and saying, well, I don't know, where did all these students come from? Like, they came out of the blue. Why are they going to Tennessee State? And why can't they go? You know, they've been trying to recruit them at the University of Tennessee. They can't get them there. They want to go to Tennessee State. We don't know what it is. And he's like perplexed. Now, I'm an email person, so I sent a very strongly worded email to that senator with some things that are not relevant now. But it's just, anyway, it's a lot. It brings me joy to talk about my school in the midst of all the challenges that many HBCUs face. I say all that to say, the step would be, so many companies are constantly, I only know this because they hire me to consult, are constantly saying, we want to look for, Black talent. They say diverse talent. It could be Black, it could be other people of color. I can absolutely tell them school systems that are looking for Black educators, they're all at HBCU. Have you looked? Have you partnered? Have you gone there to do a job fair? Have you recruited? Anyway, so that's my little plug for that is, there's Black excellence all over, but if you want to get a whole bunch of them and they're very young and understand the world through all the technology that I don't in my almost 50-year-old life, you know, reach out. I'm happy to help organizations partner with HBCUs. You can't just send them an email and say, hey, we'd like some of your graduates. It doesn't work that way. There's a whole culture to how things are done. But that's where they are. So that
they
was
can
my
reach
plug.
you. They can reach you. I'm going to put in your 2 websites and also your scheduling link. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Put that in there as well. They might not come up as actual links unless I do them one at a time. I'm going to give them to Jody to put it in the Facebook. So I'm curious. Well, first of all, it was so wonderful to see your energy when you started talking about your experience at the university. And, you know, I think that a lot of people forget how it looks, you know, to be in a world where, you know, I would say white people don't even forget, they don't know. Right? White people, there are a lot of white people. I won't say all white people, but there are a lot of white people who don't know the experience that you just shared around, you know, we're swimming in water and we're all in the water and we all, you know, people all look the same, but most people who are Black or even Asian and even queer, LGBTQ, don't really feel that energy until they're in that space. Like I know I went to a summit in September called Lesbians Who Tech. And it's actually lesbians and allies and also, but it was a huge number of queer people in one space. And of course we were in the Castro in San Francisco. So, but so I was crying. I'm like, oh my God, like I was in this place, you know?
Right.
You know,
and then you're like, why can't the conference be forever? Like, why is the conference only a week?
It was hard when it ended. It really was. And so I can only imagine how you and now your daughter feel jumping into this beautiful collage of people like yourself in so many ways, you know, and being able to, and so you are getting the opposite appreciation. You're starting off by living in an all-white community and feeling so out there, singled out and unique, so to speak, right? And then getting to experience this, whereas most people never know the difference.
No, and that's another webinar for another day, right? Because so many Black, I can't speak for all people of color. I know a number of Black people are socialized to believe the white man's ice is colder, right? So we have to go to those schools and be there and be the standout. And that may work for a number of people. What I know as an adult is I run into more adults, Black adults, who tell me they wish they would have gone to an HBCU, because on their campus, while there may have been a multicultural center or there may have been a Black student union or whatever on their campus, they were still a small percentage on the campus, and still their professors didn't look like them, or, you know, whatever. So yeah, for our family, the girls don't have a choice. They don't have to go to TSU, but there are 106 they can choose from. Just pick one. I don't care. Pick one.
It's a gift that you're giving. Yeah, I know it's a gift that you're giving your daughters. Yeah, you're imposing it, but it's also something that they otherwise won't experience.
Right. And it's such a short window. You know, it's that short window when everybody's very impressionable between, you know, 18 and 20, whatever, 1, 2, however long you're in college.
Their brains are still forming.
Right.
For students with executive function, they don't form until 25.
That's right. It's still such a short window. So, but I'm a huge advocate. I would love, I could talk forever, but I really want people, again, in their circle of influence, as you know, I was in another organization that's a tech organization, having a talk last week, and they're always like, oh, well, why can't we find? And I said, well, first of all, they have to find your student internship page on your website, and it's buried. So, you know, what kind of relationships do you, I know you go to colleges, like, do you go to any HBCUs? Like, so yeah.
Would you be willing to take a few moments? I know we're almost at the end, but to talk to us about your book and tell people more about what it is, because the title alone is like, I will say that, when the George Floyd murder happened, there were white people asking all over the place, what do we do? I mean, who do we, and they would randomly call a friend from years ago that was Black to ask them questions like, no, don't do that. You're going to call them and ask them how they're doing first. Like, don't just call and ask to be educated. So I know your book has some components of that, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Not at all, not at all. So yes, that is what my lived experience was in the summer of 2020. And I was processing, as everyone was processing, but I was really struggling with, why do they keep calling me? Like, what? We were in high school 30 years ago. You don't have anybody else. You don't have any more Black friends. Like, you haven't made any more Black friends in 30 years. Like, and so that's where the title came from. So the title came from because for a lot of my educational experience, I was that one. And interestingly, as I see my daughters, I can just see their friend group. And if their friend group was to age like 20 years and they're sitting in my training and they would say, oh, I had a best friend in high school who was Black. And of course, it'd be my daughter, right, that they're talking about, because they have that one Black friend. And so that was where the title came from. And again, as I was processing, I'm like, okay, is it that we are so unusual? Like, are we just unicorns in this world? Well, no, because we are created through our circumstances. And so I basically walked through my life and the circumstances that occurred, the lessons I learned at very young ages. So basically the book walks through a whole bunch of lessons. So lessons in representation matters, and the lessons sometimes repeat throughout the book. Lessons in how white people's comfort is my highest priority. So the lessons can be a lot of things, because as a Black child and as a Black adult, I navigate a lot of things to exist and to be able to answer your question, classmate from high school that's asking me 30 minutes on the phone to make you feel better because you're crying. And, I can answer your question and not hurt your feelings, because I have learned how to navigate, and this is how I learned how to navigate. So that's the book. The workbook is the companion to that, because it's the questions that I want people to really process and really think through. Because to quote my husband, which I was very offended when he said it, but the book is a quick read. And I was like, that's rude. And he's like, no, it's not like reading Barack Obama. It's not dense. It's an easy read. So the book is easy to read, but it's very layered in the learning. And so that's what the workbook is, are the questions that are connected to that.
Yeah, and I think that's I think that's really important. I'm thinking about the idea that there's Google. Google can answer a lot of questions, number one. But one of the things that I was recently doing a training this fall with my diversity team, and someone in the group kept on saying, well, I have a coworker and I can ask her anything. You can really go to her. She's happy to answer. I'm like, yeah, but can we consider the trauma that's being reignited and reinvited every day that you ask her the question? Why can you kind of widen your resources so it's not always, but she's okay with me doing it?
Or the labor of that, right? The labor of not only answering your question, but not hurting your feelings.
Right, not hurting your feelings. and not being able to feel her own feelings as a result.
Right. The labor of that is exhausting. And I started the book and I was in third grade, so I was like 8. So the labor of a child carrying that, right, versus white children who can exist in a, and not all, I know I feel bad when I say white children because I work in child welfare, right? I know that there are harm that happens to all children, but my white classmates, I'll frame it that way, who moved through the world and did not have to carry that labor, right? They were not the object of the turn around and look when we get to that part of the history lesson and every year, because we don't get to the good stuff in the history class, we stop at, you know, civil rights, but that's another conversation for another day.
Right. Yeah, we got a lot of opportunities for conversation.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but I'm happy to, I know you like to have space for if there are questions. I didn't see any questions, but maybe there are
yeah,
some.
there's one Q&A. It's actually someone said, and I think this could be for you, this could be for us. How can those of us who live in other countries and continents best access resources on anti-racism and better education on Black Lives Matter? And so
I saw that person lived in a place that I visited. So I went to both New Zealand and Australia
yeah.
when I was 40 with another group, and that was my birthday gift to myself. So one of the things I remember from that trip is, which is, I feel like how colonization works. The disparities are the same no matter where you are. So I was having conversation with other youth workers in New Zealand and Australia, not Victoria, Australia. I was in Sydney. But we were having conversation, and it was the same conversations. It was the same disparity. So the disparities that they see with Aboriginal children there are the same disparities that we see with children of color here. So I would suggest that perhaps the resources could be similar, because at least with the child welfare population, like or juvenile youth serving populations, I saw the same kind of disparities. Now, I don't know if that's the case in all countries. I just happen to know that one because I visited there, was there for a minute. But
Yeah.
do you have other suggestions?
Yeah, well, did you want to share? So we're going to be sending you some resources, and hopefully you should be able to access them because they are definitely part of, there's Black-owned stores. There's a huge reading list that we'll be sending out. There are videos. There are also documentaries and podcasts. Jody actually listens. Well, you tell them. I don't need to talk for you.
When I exercise, I listen to the podcast
every single morning, pretty much.
And they have a lot of information. There's a lot of different ones out there. Some are like intersectionality now, Kimberly Crenshaw, Code Switch with NPR, Best of the Left.
But all these links are going to be on the
Newsbeat. All of them incorporate social justice and looking, you know, the episodes vary depending on what they are, but there's a lot of episodes that are specific to racist policies and how they impact individuals in the United States and globally.
Yeah. And so, and
there's a book,
videos. There's a test that you can take, an implicit bias test. There's Facebook presence, there are websites. So we've got a lot of, hopefully there are a lot of, and also organizations you can make donations to. So even if you're not in this country, we certainly encourage you to support different organizations that are Black owned, that are supporting education for Black people, supporting, there are even organizations supporting restructuring the system. So yep, that's the link. Thank you for the implicit Harvard test. Yes, that's it. Absolutely. And again, as soon as the webinar is over, there's an automatic transmission of the email that comes to everybody when it says webinar is over. Boom, that email should be going out. So yeah, glad we could answer your question. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a book called "Why I No Longer Talk to White People About Race," and the author is from England. And so the examples and everything are based in London or English England English, not not American English. Because again, I mean, colonization kind of worked the same way everywhere. So that's an example of, I mean, it's a great book, but it's not a United States of America type racist situation, but it's over in London.
And I also have a student whose school assigned, this was a 5th grader, they were assigned this book. This book is anti-racist by, is 20 lessons on how to wake up, take action, and do the work by Tiffany Jewell, illustrated by Aurelia Durand. And they were actually, as a class, reading this together and then doing the actions at home. That's on the list, I believe. So, and of course, please buy the book by Cassandra.
Yes.
We definitely don't want to take advantage of her time.
Yes, my host family from Australia and New Zealand both have the book, so it is international. It's international.
So what we'll do, just so we can honor your time too, Cassandra, is we're going to stop the live stream. We're going to stop the recording. We'll say goodbye to everybody on Facebook.
Bye, everyone on Facebook.
And we are going to stop recording and